Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 40 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits. But I've found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here, you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. It's shoutout time for this month's patrons over at patreon.com. This month, my special thanks go out to Matthew Saint, Josh Bald, Utuk Zul, and newest patron, Julio Herrera. I truly appreciate what you do to help keep the show running. If you'd like to add your name to this list, please go to patreon.com/welcome to Geektown and pledge $1 or more per month to hear my thanks to you each month, as well as getting access to bloopers/outtakes and full scripts of past shows. This week, Anthony H. asked, what are some interesting hero-villain mismatches? As the question implies, heroes and villains are often paired together. Lex Luthor and Superman, Batman and the Joker, Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, the X-Men and the Sentinels. For many of the more iconic pairings, there's a reason that the hero and villain keep crossing paths. Often there are ideological reasons that will cause an antagonist to keep seeking out the protagonist, like Lex Luthor with Superman, the Joker with Batman, or the Sentinels and the X-Men. But even when there's nothing in particular tying a bad guy to a specific hero, it seems like they keep running across each other in comics. For instance, Shocker, seen briefly in the Spider-Man Homecoming movie, usually is performing some sort of street-level crime, like robbing a bank, when Spider-Man arrives to take him down. But in a city as crowded with superheroes as the Marvel Universe's New York is, you'd think that he'd be fighting Captain America, or Daredevil, or even Speedball equally as often. But no, it's almost always Spidey who takes him in. There's no real in-story reason that these matchups keep happening, but on a meta level, the explanation is usually that villains continue to be matched up with the hero whose book they first appeared in. So, Spider-Man keeps seeing the Vulture and Sandman, while Daredevil continues to run up against the Owl and Typhoid Mary. Occasionally, a villain that first appeared in one book will become more associated with a different hero, but that is pretty rare. Two examples readily come to mind, however. The first would be how the Kingpin started out as a Spider-Man villain, but now is primarily Daredevil's nemesis. The other that I came up with off the top of my head is Sabretooth, who originally showed up in Iron Fist number 14 and was a recurring antagonist in his book, but now is considered to be a Wolverine villain. But Anthony wanted to know about some of the more bizarre mix-ups of villain and hero that have occurred. His question was inspired by seeing a picture of a venomized Groot. That was fan art, however, and actually Groot and Venom were both members of the Guardians of the Galaxy together for a time, so that doesn't qualify as a hero and villain mismatch. I'm also going to leave out intercompany crossovers like Archie versus Punisher for a couple of reasons. One, Punisher isn't really a villain, but an anti-hero, and two, I'm betting weird crossovers could be a completely separate episode. So, these matches have to be within the same fictional universe. Let's start with one character who is specifically known for taking on super powerful villains associated with other heroes. Doreen Green, aka Squirrel Girl. In Squirrel Girl's first appearance, Marvel Superheroes number 8, written by Will Murray, plotted and drawn by Steve Ditko, Squirrel Girl rescues a captured Iron Man from Doctor Doom. It has since become a running gag that Squirrel Girl take on and defeat villains who she has no right being able to deal with, given her limited power set. The proportional strength and speed of a squirrel, as well as the ability to talk to squirrels. This includes taking on MODOK, Thanos, and even convincing Galactus to leave Earth alone. Until recently, Squirrel Girl hasn't been shown to have any of her own nemeses unique to her, so this is kind of an edge case. However, in the next example, both the hero and villain have arch-enemies they usually face, and are completely mismatched against the other. This is DC's story, where we find Superman fighting the Joker. Of course, if both of these characters were at their regular power levels, this would be a very quick and one-sided fight. But the story I'm looking at is called Emperor Joker, written by Joe Kelly, penciled by the usual team of artists from the 4 Superman titles of the early 2000s. Although it takes a few issues to learn this occurred, it all starts with Mr. Mxyzptlk deciding to give his powers to a human being to see what would happen. Intending to give 1% of his abilities to the Joker, Mxyzptlk gets tricked into passing 99.9% of his power to the Clown Prince of Crime, who then proceeds to change the world to his liking. In this altered world, the usual JLA members are all villains, and the quote-unquote real Justice League are supervillains led by Bizarro, who regularly captures Superman and puts him back in Arkham Asylum. Superman at first believes this upside-down world to be real, but slowly realizes things are not right. The Man of Steel locates Mxyzptlk, who had occasionally been appearing to him as an astral projection, who returns Superman's memories to him and reveals how this transformation had taken place. We also find out around this time that Joker's constant manipulation of reality is tearing it apart. After a few fruitless fights, Superman eventually discovers Joker's weakness, which turns out to be his connection to Batman, whom Joker had been continually killing then bringing back to life, and is able to get Joker to unwittingly return Mxyzptlk's powers to the 5th dimensional imp. Things are returned back to normal for the most part, although Batman still recalls every death he went through under Emperor Joker's hands, leaving him broken inside. Superman offers to take the memories of those deaths himself. Apparently, Superman has a stronger will than Batman does, as we never saw any repercussions of Clark having to deal with those memories that broke Bruce's sanity. Moving over to Marvel, there was a crossover storyline that specifically dealt with switching villains around from their usual nemesis. Writer/editor Mark Gruenwald came up with the idea, and it was approved by then editor-in-chief Tom DeFalco. The storyline was called Acts of Vengeance, and was very different from crossovers both past and future. The main arc of the story took place in the 2 core Avengers books, Avengers and West Coast Avengers. But while many other titles got involved in the storyline, very few of those ancillary books touched on the main plot at all, and simply used it as an excuse to pit their title's hero or heroes against an unusual villain. In-universe, the idea was originated by Loki, albeit in disguise, and the core villains who teamed up with the Trickster God were Dr. Doom, the Red Skull, Magneto, Kingpin, the Mandarin, and the Wizard. Of course, you put that many egos into one room, and there's bound to be infighting. Magneto and Red Skull in particular fought each other in Captain America number 367, with Holocaust survivor Magneto revealing that his motivation for joining this group was actually to get close and take vengeance against the Nazi Red Skull. This internal strife led to the downfall of the villains, and the mastermind Loki was caught by the Avengers and sent back to Asgard. As I mentioned earlier, many of the stories that carried the Axe of Vengeance banner involved heroes fighting villains not normally in their rogues gallery. At the beginning of the story arc, Loki had arranged a breakout at the superhuman prison known as the Vault, and many of these escapees were sent to take on heroes that they had never faced before. The theory was that since the superheroes were not familiar with the powers and fighting styles of these released villains, that they would be more likely to be defeated. As you can guess, this didn't work out, but it definitely made for some interesting stories. For instance, in Thor 411 and 412, the Thunder God, Thor, fought against X-Men villain Juggernaut. This story is also noteworthy as being the first published appearance of the New Warriors team, including my favorite hero, Speedball. We also saw Daredevil take on an Ultron robot, Power Pack take on Typhoid Mary, and Punisher set against Dr. Doom himself. The most interesting take on this story, however, took place in the 3 Spider-Man titles: Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, and Web of Spider-Man. The writers on the Spidey books at the time took advantage of this storyline to pit the Wallcrawler against villains who are normally way outside of Peter's weight class, including Titania, the Hulk, in his smarter but still strong gray persona, and even Magneto. However, Spider-Man ended up on more than equal footing with these powerful foes, as during this story, he was partially imbued with the powers of Captain Universe, a cosmic-level power that possesses people as needed. Over the couple of months this crossover took place, Peter's strength increased, his spider sense became more acute, and he gained new powers like telescopic vision, flight, and even the power to change the molecular structure of anything he touched. When he fought the Hulk in Amazing Spider-Man number 328, Spidey ends up punching the Grey Hulk into orbit, then flies up into space to retrieve Hulk. This Cosmic Spider-Man storyline ends in an Axe of Vengeance epilogue, where Loki, in one last fit of pique after being returned to Asgard by the Avengers, magically combines and activates a Tri-Sentinel, an extra powerful sentinel with 3 faces and 6 arms, and sends it to destroy the Amity Point nuclear plant. After a 1-page tussle with Graviton, which Spider-Man easily wins, Spider-Man gains the full awareness of the source of his powers and that the Captain Universe Force, also known as the Enigma Force, was given to him in anticipation of this Tri-Sentinel getting loose. Spider-Man takes the killer robot out, and the Captain Universe powers move on once again. Coincidentally, Marvel is currently running a spiritual sequel to the Axe of Vengeance story with the Axe of Evil banner displayed on this year's annuals, in the same font as the Axe of Vengeance banner was. Unlike Axe of Vengeance, there is no overarching plot as to why these heroes are facing unusual villains, but that mismatch is the running theme between these stories, as we have Deadpool facing Nightmare, normally a Doctor Strange villain, Moon Knight versus Kang, and Punisher fighting the Brood Queen. If you're unfamiliar with the Brood, imagine Frank Castle fighting against the Alien Queen from the Aliens movies. Like Axe of Vengeance before it, Most of these fights have been skewed to the villain being stronger than the hero, but in the other direction, you can also check out She-Hulk taking on Bullseye. I've read all the issues that have come out so far, and the quality on these has been top-notch. So if you get a chance, definitely go check these out from your local friendly neighborhood comic shop. So, Anthony, I hope that points you in the right direction to some past and present stories to check out for unique hero-villain pairings. How about the rest of you listeners? Is there something specific you want to learn about? Remember, it doesn't just have to be about comics. I'll gladly answer questions about sci-fi, fantasy, board games, role-playing games, or other geeky subjects. If you have something you want to learn more about, please send me an email at welcometogeektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or ask your question anonymously if you prefer by clicking Submit a Question at www.welcome2, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcometogeektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcometogeektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them, "Welcome to Geektown, population, us." Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.